In this video, I want to talk about my final two economic indicators covered off in this series. They are the continuous jobless claims report and the unemployment rate, both related to employment and are both lagging indicators. My name is Jared Ayers. I am a CFA charter holder and I've been investing my money over 20 years on a consistent basis, beating the market. I've created this channel to share with you my strategies, techniques, and thought processes that I use to invest my money. As usual, I want to give you a little bit of background on both of these indicators before we jump into how they perform relative to the broader stock market. Firstly, the continuing jobless claims report is, as I mentioned, a lagging indicator. It indicates the number of individuals who have claims on unemployment insurance. So it's continuing claims. That's different from the initial jobless claims report, which precedes this one by 1 week, but gives you a fairly good indication on a weekly basis how many people are collecting unemployment insurance. That is a little bit different than the unemployment rate itself, which is a monthly indicator, also lagging, and lagging really due to the fact that really employees are really the last thing to go when a company is in difficulty, really just because of the cost and difficulty letting people go and then having to rehire and find that new talent once everything turns around. So you'll see when we get into the actual graphics themselves how these indicators perform against the actual stock market itself. The unemployment rate, I should mention, is really just a single measure of the labor force that is jobless. It has, of course, come under scrutiny and criticisms in the past. Does it really represent how healthy the employment market actually is? To me, that's not as important as the fact that the market does react to this indicator. And what I'm really looking for when I look at it is its relative to performance over time to its own history. So not really comparing it too much or worrying too much how it compares to other employment type indicators or statistics. So I want to now share with you a little bit more about how these indicators perform relative to the broader market. So as mentioned, I wanted to share with you the relationship between the continuing jobless claims as well as the unemployment rate and the S&P 500. So in this initial graph, you can see the continuing jobless claims versus the S&P. You can see since the late 90s and probably further back if we went further back, the way these two, the indicator, which is in the blue and sort of orange lines, versus the S&P 500, which is in sort of that brownish line, how they move almost opposite to one another, almost a negative correlation. When I put the trend lines on that graph, you can see that at the beginning of the tech bubble, the continuing jobless claims did come down to kind of a low and then started to climb up just as the S&P 500 was reaching its peak, and then took quite a quick swing upwards in a trajectory versus the S&P 500, which of course came back down. Same sort of trend you can see as we approach the Great Recession, kind of a downtrend in the indicator, then a small to sort of flat to somewhat upward trend right at up to about the beginning of the Great Recession, and then all of a sudden it takes a big swing straight up as the S&P came down. So it is a lagging indicator, but as you can see here, the way it behaves relative to the stock market at large is still fairly valuable insofar as, with this indicator, behaving quite drastically in either direction. Usually you'll see the S&P 500 doing the opposite of that. So as you can see, currently we're in sort of a long downhill trend with the continuing jobless claims being almost at their, they are pretty much at their lowest point in recent history anyway. Same sort of action and behavior is what you get when you look at the unemployment rate versus the S&P 500. Similar, when we put the trend lines on it, we see a very similar pattern with as soon as that indicator starts to turn up, usually the S&P 500 is maybe started to turn down just a little bit before that. Remembering this is a monthly indicator, so it lags even more so than the continuing jobless claims. So with these two indicators behaving in the same way, usually you get a bit of a lead using the continuing jobless claims versus the unemployment rate in terms of what might be happening. Similarly, as you approach the Great Recession, same sort of movement with a slight increase in the unemployment rate followed by a steep increase right at the point basically when the market starts to fall heavily to the downside. And then of course, where we are currently in a long downhill trend there in terms of the unemployment rate to an all-time low, at least again in recent history. So that's really what I wanted to share with you. This is the last pair of indicators in my 13 indicators that I currently look at on a regular basis, and wanted to share with you, how they behave and how I look at them in the broader scheme of my own economic analysis to determine where exactly we are in the economy. So I hope that was helpful. So once again, I hope this video was helpful for you. This is the final video in this series on my economic indicators, how I look at them and how they perform relative to the market. In future videos, I do plan to share with you updates on these indicators, where they are currently, and keep you up to date on what I see as it relates to the economy and my investment portfolio. So do stay tuned for those. If you have any questions specifically related to this video, please add comments or questions in the comment section. If you're not already a subscriber but you would like to be notified and follow along as I upload more and more videos, then please of course hit the subscribe button, and I appreciate any feedback and questions that I get from anybody. They always often challenge my own views on how I see things as well. So always welcome similar or contradictory opinions. So hopefully this was helpful, and hope to see you back here soon.